Welcome, y'all. It's Wes with DIY Food Plot Pro. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode, we're going to talk about, can we have too much food on a property that it makes the property really difficult to hunt? And also, how do we know when we have too much food? When we've reached that area where, okay, we've got enough on some amount of acres that we have. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. I think it's going to be a really good episode that I can bring a lot of light to across the outfitter that we run on. With the whitetail outfitter that I own, we've got about 2,900 acres, and we picked up a big tract this year, was about 1,100, but all the rest of them are essentially 70 to 150 acres. With the food plots that we have on these properties, we've been able to kind of look at this and take a real life perspective of this, is how many food plots do we need, and can we have too many on these properties? Because that's a big concern. And I'm going to bring some perspective on that from the outfit. So a couple examples of can we have too much food? And before we were CWD area and we were not allowed to put out any bait anymore, minerals or corn or anything like that is illegal in our area, we used to put out piles and piles of corn, right? We're in heavy ag country. It was just very common. You know, you would just see piles and piles of this stuff around on every single farm that you went to. Well, you pick a 200-acre farm, there might be 9 or 10 different corn piles on that 200-acre farm. It kind of gets difficult to hunt, right? Because you've got so many corn piles that the whitetails can choose from that it's really hard to guess which one they're going to be at, right? Because a lot of deer aren't patternable. Let's face it, when it gets past, they shed that velvet in mid-September, patterning deer pretty much goes out the window. We can kind of make some general assumptions of these deer, but as far as he's going to be here at 5:30 every single day, that goes out the window as soon as they shed their velvet. It's really hard to pattern those deer in the fall months and say, okay, he's coming to this corn pile every single day, or it was for us. That was one thing that we got into is, okay, he'd be at this corn pile, you go hunt this corn pile, and then he'd be at this corn pile. Okay, so you're kind of always a step behind him, right, when we were doing that. Something that me and the other guides kind of talked about was, if we just had 1 or 2 piles, we would be doing better than trying to spread all these deer out over, 8 or 10 piles that we had. And unfortunately, we never got to try that because the CWD ban that went into place there shortly afterward. With food plots, I've seen the exact same thing on farms where you have too many food plots on the property. It can be very, very, very difficult to pick out and hunt a stand location because it's kind of like the same type of deal. You're chasing them. He was here last night, or he's been coming in here pretty regular. You go hunt, all of a sudden he shows up in here. From a land manager's perspective, a landowner's perspective, we want those deer to have as little stress as possible, right? We don't want those deer to be stressed. We don't want those deer to not have enough food. We want our land to be the land of milk and honey, the land of plenty. That's what we want our properties to be. But setting that up, making it the land of plenty and making it a land that we can hunt effectively can look like two completely different things. Before I go any further, I would like for you to drop down in the comment section and tell me how many acres of food plots do you think is needed per 100 acres of land that you hunt. One of the farms that we kind of butt up against on the outfit, it's a big farm and the landowner does a lot of quality food plots on. And we try our best to do our high quality food plots on there as well. Standing corn, brassicas, annual clovers, cereal rye, oats. I mean, we pack it in there, but he packs his side in there too, right? He's got a big old tract. I'd say he's got probably 15 different food plots on that farm. Very, very, very difficult for us to hunt those deer in that area unless we have something that he doesn't have. So for a couple years, we had more corn than what he had. So when his corn ran out, our corn was still plenty. We were pulling a lot of deer to that area. But when everything's the same, he's got corn, I've got corn, and he's got 6 or 7 different spots of corn, and I've got my 2 or 3 spots of corn, man, you talk about hard hunting. Those deer have a lot of choices to go to. They're not really stressed out at all, and they're not having to get up and feed as regularly on this one plot, right? They're sitting there and they're going to go to this plot in the afternoon. And they're going to maybe go to this plot the next day, this plot the next day. And they're not doing those patterns like a lot of us like to see them do when there are so many plots around. So that's one thing when you're competing with other people who are plotting. It really pays to diversify and try to do something different if you can do something that's more preferred than what they are. If they're doing clover and you try to do standing corn, if you can get standing corn, it will outcompete their clover. But if they're doing standing corn and you're going to try to do brassicas, he's already got brassicas over here and he's got standing corn, more than likely your brassicas are going to do very little at pulling mature deer off of his property. His deer are already content over there. A perfect example of this is the velvet season. We get piles and piles of pictures of bucks hitting a soybean field. And generally, unless something crazy happens, that buck gets bumped, somebody walks in there, does some scouting and bumps him, he's generally going to come to this field pretty much every single day when you get out of ag country, right? If you have a soybean field that's by itself, you can pretty much guarantee he's going to be there every single day. On the flip side, right here where we're at, there are 10 fields within a half a mile of these woods that are behind us. All of them will be in soybeans in 1 year. It is almost impossible to get a pattern on a deer down in here because he has so many choices to go to. It happens every single year when I run cameras down here, I get to see this, is he'll be here today, tomorrow he'll be over here, the next day he may be back here again, the next day he's behind you, the next day he's on this field. It's much more difficult to pattern deer when they have more choices than just one choice. So what I like to do when we're talking about food plot hunting these whitetails, I prefer to have 1 or 2 bigger plots on the property. How many acres of food plots is needed on your property per 100 acres? This is something that's kind of a moving target. This is going to be something that is going to change, whether you're in ag country, solid woods, maybe a mix of ag and woods, the amount of deer that are living on your property. The environmental factors, there's going to be so many variables in this. How much food should we have on the property, and should we break this down into multiple smaller plots, or should we do a couple bigger ones? I typically prefer doing the bigger plots and maybe doing 1 or 2 big plots per 100 acres to get me to 4 to 5 acres of food per 100 acres, because it's much easier for me to raise what I want to raise, such as corn, standing beans, those kind of food plots, on a 2 or 3 acre food plot. Where if I was coming out here and trying to pick this little corner that's a half acre, would be almost impossible for me to come out here and plant that in corn and to have anything left of any significance by deer season. So I would prefer having a couple plots that are bigger, set up for different wind directions that I can hunt during the season in and around. I do think you can have too much food on a property. I 100% do. So if you need help setting up your deer hunting farms, you can go to our website, www.diyfoodplotpro.com. Click on Boots on the Ground Visit. I'll come to your property, make a detailed plan, send you a 3-ring binder of the detailed plan when I'm finished with it. That will cover everything from TSI and FSI and access and mock scrapes and water holes, food plots. The whole 9 yards will be on that plan that you can implement on your property to raise that bar on the property. If that's something that interests you, you can go to www.diyfoodplotpro.com, click on Boots on the Ground Visit. Thank you so much for watching. Smash that like and subscribe button.